outside.
They're waiting for Kitty. She'll be leaving in a few minutes.
John Brahm had a great background in German Expressionism. And also, he was a very flamboyant director, in a sense. He was able to do things visually that became great metaphors. For example, the backlot Whitechapel set really becomes symbolic of Jack the Ripper's heart and soul. You know, the darkness, the alleys, the dampness, the dank, demonic shadows, all of these things. It's almost like you're taking a tour of the Ripper's mind.
Another example of this subjectivity is when the lodger is in a room and the landlady comes in, and he has just turned the pictures of the women in the room around, so that's very, very odd.
There was something peculiar about those pictures. I don't suppose you ever noticed it, but wherever you went in this room, the eyes of those women seemed to follow you about.
Notice the camera placing here. It's so far back, it's almost an extreme long shot, and he's in a corner. It's a subjective shot. He feels so alone, so alienated. This is Brahm telling us, or making us feel what he feels. He feels alienated. The landlady comes in, he's far away. He's far away from us, the spectator, in this extreme long shot. All this space between him, the lodger, and us. This is what he feels in his own life. This is how he goes around. He feels this space, this alienation. And this is the way that Brahm renders his subjectivity. This is what German Expressionism was all about.
I think The Lodger has one of the great climaxes of 1940s cinema when it's set in the theatre, which is basically the whole movie revolves around. And you have Krieger's character who has now been basically worked into a corner by everybody else into the movie.
Once again, we see the man-to-beast transformation. It's wonderful, wonderful bravura acting. And of course, at the end, when Brahm takes the camera in very, very close to him, and his face just fills the screen, and you see his wild eyes and staring like that trapped rat face again. Unforgettable stuff. Brilliant, brilliant acting.
Because by now, although we know what we know about him, he is more victim than victimizer. And it's this thing about the monster, the creature. You know, within all of us, we see this dark side, which is one of the reasons that John persists for so long and so well, is it echoes our mental states to a large degree. So there's no real physical transformation in that, but there's a kind of emotional transformation that we have given him. We have given that character our heart, in a way. So seeing him be destroyed, so to speak, is a double set of emotions, because we know that justice should be done, but we're also upset that it is being done, has been done, and feel that he's as much a victim as anything.
I think Laird Krieger, for most people, is the definitive Jack the Ripper on the screen. He brings all the attributes that we associate to the character. But the nice thing about Barry Lyndon's script is it gives his character a psychological reason for the killings. He's not just an out-and-out mad guy. He really does have a reason that he believes in, that he's doing some kind of good for the public by getting these women off the street. And Krieger had such a range as an actor that he could carry this off in such a way that the audience would believe that he really was this kind of Jekyll and Hyde character.
I think Brahm recognized from early on what Krieger was doing with the role. And I think he also gambled on the fact that some of what he was doing was so unusual and so sophisticated that it would get by. It was kind of a sly approach that Brahm and Krieger collaborated on. Laird Krieger's attitude was, let me run with this and do this my own very, very odd way. And Brahm's response was, let's see what we can get away with here. That's the great thing about the film. They really got away with a very, very unorthodox Jack the Ripper film, in a sense. It's the greatest Jack the Ripper film ever made, but it's also the strangest.
Look at that remarkable brow. It's lofty. You see the life in those eyes. They're fine and clear. There's a sensitivity about his lips. You're looking at the work of a genius.
Zanuck was very pleased with it. One change that Zanuck made in The Lodger is the woman whom you see murdered in the opening actually appears later in the film. And that is the character of Annie Rowley, played by Helena Picard. And she was supposed to be killed later in the film after she visits Merle Oberon at the theater. But it was such a brilliant scene that murder of her in the Whitechapel slums, that Zanuck said, this has to open the picture. So we'll take this from here and put it in the beginning. We won't show her close up. We'll dub in some new dialogue. Somebody calls off Goodnight Katie, I believe, instead of Goodnight Annie. They dubbed that in and changed it. And as a result, actually what happens in The Lodger is a woman that you see murdered in the opening shows up 15 or 20 minutes later and has a sizable role.
Miss, you know me. I'm Annie Rowley.
The Lodger was a tremendous critical and commercial success. And John Brahm was immediately paired again with Laird Krieger and George Sanders and the writer Barry Lyndon and the producer Robert Bassler to make another similar type of a movie. And Laird Krieger was delighted by the hit of The Lodger. As a matter of fact, when it opened at the Roxy in New York, he was supposed to make a one-night appearance, and he was so thrilled with the response of the audience and with his own burgeoning stardom that he went every night.
If you look at The Lodger, it looks forward to the Hammer films of the 1950s because they have period settings, period British Gothic. That seemed to be the note that Fox was sounding in horror. And later on, that became almost a dominant note in horror for a while. So maybe they just got in there early on it.
The Lodger is really one of the first psychological horror films, and certainly one of the first horror films in which the monster, we'll say, the human monster, is motivated by twisted sex. That really didn't become a film staple until many years later with Psycho. In many ways, it was, at the time, it was a more groundbreaking horror film than, say, The Wolfman. Because The Wolfman was another monster, it was a fascinating monster, and it was well done, but this was a monster based on history, based on an actual case that was, only 40 years old, and it was based on a killer whose motivation was twisted sex.